a lot of that goes to, like you said, the lack of knowledge and knowing what things are fundamental, what things are tribal or region based, like certain things are fundamentals of that tradition where kind of wherever you go, you see that thing occurring, even if it's done a little differently. That base thing is happening. Like a pouring of a libation is a pouring of a libation. But some people might pour libation like this or like that. But a pouring of a libation in itself is a fundamental aspect of a culture, right? So maybe they didn't say the prayer quite like them, or maybe they said it differently, or maybe they shouted different deities when they did it, but they still, that water touched the ground in homage, right? Like the basis of what that is took place. So, like you say, though, it's just a lack of knowledge. Yeah, I'll try to cut y'all a break, family, and be like, well, maybe it's just because people are used to hiding stuff from the slave master to the diaspora. Papa Hector said, y'all just don't know.
No, y'all just don't know. It's the same thing. Like a lot of our practices are constantly being like a big thing here in the US to tell people is that everything is a closed practice, right? When you go to the island, the first thing most Houngans and Mambos are going to tell you is everybody got spirits. They might not have this spirit, but everybody got spirits. And we have the techniques and the secrets to help you contact whatever spirit it is that you have, right? You can't claim that that the divine beings, the divine that we serve is only for a small group of people. If it's only for a small group of people, then it ain't God, right? Because God is for everybody.
Right.
Like that's a Muslim Christian mindset, right? Um, of course, there's different people in the world. They're gonna have different spirits. They're gonna have different ancestors.
Right.
But we got the methods to teach you to deal with that. In fact, when you go to Haiti and you go and you mention, let's say, an Orisha, right? Do you know what we call that in Haiti? We call that a Lwa.
Mm-hmm.
They refer to that as a Lwa. And when you're like, oh yeah, I serve, let's say, Oshumare, right? I serve Oshumare. And they'll ask you, where did you learn to serve Oshumare? And then you're like, yeah, I learned that in Cuba. Or they're like, oh, that's just a Cuban Lwa. That's a Cuban Lwa. That's a Lwa of the Cubans, right? So we say the Lwa is everywhere. Like there's crossroads everywhere. There's woods everywhere. The sea touches everywhere. There's rivers everywhere. We all bleed the same blood. You know, if you're overly concerned with like people's skin color and gender, I have to question how much you can actually spiritually see, because it's not about the body, but rather the spirit that's in the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because you hear a similar thing in voodoo where they kind of call everything voodoons because that's the name they give to a nature spirit. So anything that's a nature spirit to them is going to register as a voodoo because maybe they don't know Creole to say the word loa or
Or
they
maybe they don't know the word no. Like in some places, they have gnomes and fairies and
right,
this.
right. They don't know to say a gnome or a fairy
Yeah,
or
that's not
whatever.
part of our language,
Yeah, it's
right?
not part
It's
of the
not part
language.
of our language. Our language, when we refer to spirit, is a vote. Like in Benin, is a Vodou, or here in Haiti, that's a Lwa,
Right.
right? And there's Lwa that are regional. There's Lwa that are served in one area of Haiti that they don't serve at all or don't even know in another area.
Yes.
We have Lwa that live or inhabit in certain rivers, in certain caves. The only way to deal with that spirit is to go to that cave and deal with that spirit. So for us, pretty much any spirit is referred to as a Lwa.
Right. And that goes also as well into the aspects of the understanding that comes with knowing, right? And with the understanding that comes with knowing, you can understand that that's their interpretation of what a nature spirit is, but still give the respect of saying, okay, that word comes from this group of people, so I'm going to respect their culture, and I'm not going to call it an Orisha just because I practice Yoruba culture, right?
Yeah,
I'm going
because
to
you
say
know
that's
differently.
Voodoo, you know?
Yeah, because you know differently.
Right,
But example, like people in Haiti, Haiti is pretty much like cut off from the majority of the rest of the world.
right,
So for them, they don't know like it's not common knowledge. Like, oh, that's an Orisha, or oh, that's an Enfumbe, that's an Nkisi, et cetera, et cetera. Even some of those words mean different things for us in Haiti. Okay, like when we use the word Orisha, which is Orisha, that refers to that's a praise name for many of the Ogus, which the Ogus kind of contained the Yoruba culture for us, right? The the majority of the Yoruba influence for us is around the Nago spirits or the Ogu spirits that contain those which, if you are aware of the other traditions, would be called Orisha, right? So, but a person in Haiti doesn't have that, and nor do we actually even, for the most part, that I've seen, most don't even look to have it because we have our own system of classification, right? And so, similar to something I've seen in African Vodou practices, right? I've had visions, done work with Kali Ma from India. Over, if you go to Benin, right, in the Vodou of Mami Wata traditions, you're going to find Shiva. You're going to find Kali. You're going to find Lakshmi, right? And they're going to refer to them as Vodus or Voduns, right? Even though they're Hindu deities.
right. And that's an interesting thing that we're seeing more and more of is the other people that are coming into these other regions and bringing their cultures and their respective deities or whatever the case is. So yeah, you can see things in Africa that you would say is maybe Hindu or Buddhist or things of that
Um,
nature, and it came from when those people might have came there with their families or whatever the case is, and now the interpretation from the natives that are there is like you say, they may not know another word to give it other than a voodoo. It's just to them another voodoo because it's
yeah,
another nature spirit.
another
You know
spirit.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's not uncommon. So like that's where I'm talking about where people think that there's these really hard lines where spirit doesn't hold hard lines. Nature doesn't hold hard lines.
Um, it doesn't. And now that's the thing too, what you saying, Papa Hector, is like, okay, because I noticed this, especially with Haitian practitioners in the diaspora. There's that connection between the Yorubas and Haitian voodoo. You can't disrespect Ifá while at the same time lifting Haitian voodoo. It's weird when you have deities like Ogu, Parai that is like direct lineage can trace right into Ogun when you go far enough. You know what I'm saying? Like literally a Nago spirit. Or like you have deities like Dambala Wedu, which when
Obatala, right?
Ogu
From
Batala.
Yeah, and because I have grown up in in Hispanic culture where we are very much around santeros, lukumi practitioners, right?
Right.
Ogu Batala, from what I understand, and I can't, you would know better than me, right? There's an Obatala that manifests as a
Yes.
warrior Obatala, right? So we have that. We don't have the
That's
Obatala king of peace. We have
okay.
Obatala the warrior.
So let's talk about it because this thing that you're saying is a real thing, but it's a thing that people may not want to accept the reality of. So my Obatala, right, the one that guards my family, is the Obatala that you're speaking of. We
Ayaguna, isn't it?
Well, in Lukumi they say Ayaguna, right?
Hmm.
But in Isheshe, there's one that's older than Ayaguna, who's a warrior that we call Ogiyan.
Okay.
Obatala Ogiyan. And Ogiyan is basically like a warrior, like a war dog who goes to war. Some people may say that it's Ayaguna. Some people say he's older than Ayaguna. That is things that got kind of blurred in time. But it is the reputation of what you're saying. It's a warrior Obatala that gets peace. How? By killing everything around him, and now it's peaceful.
So we have the same thing in Vodou, right? So we have Obatala, and that's like this younger version. That's the warrior or Batala that finds peace through war,
Yeah.
right? But then we have another version called Grand Batala. Grand Batala, Grand means old, right? Basically like a grandmother or grandfather. So this is like that old version of the Obatala warrior who now he's done so much like war to get to peace that now he's a lot wiser, right? And he's grown in wisdom. He's still a warrior. He's just more tempered down, more kind of like just like when you get older, you don't be trying to get into the same scraps and fights when you was younger. Your head cools down a little bit more. You're
Right.
like, like I can't afford to break my wrist today.
Right.
Like, nah, that shit ain't gonna fix overnight like it was when you was a little kid. You feel me?
Right.
So we have that as well. But yeah, to me, it's ridiculous that we in our traditions, whether you do Lukumi, Isheshe, Santeria, Haitian Voodoo, we already have enough people discriminating against us,
And
right? We have enough people that say we ain't no good. So us infighting with each other does not make sense, right? And for your average person, when they see a santero, or they see a voodoo person, it's all voodoo to them.
yes,
Okay? Voodoo is the word that they use for all of it. Brujeria, espiritismo, all of it is voodoo. So for your
right.
average person who's discriminating against us, right? They don't care that you're doing Isheshe and I'm doing Haitian Vodou. They don't really give a damn about that. To them, it's all voodoo and it's all evil.
So we
And when we as practitioners sit here and infight, what we do is we prove them right. They're like, how is it a good tradition? How are these traditions good if all of the priests and priestesses are constantly battling with each other, constantly jealous of each other, constantly talking shit on each other? Like, personally, we have a saying like, basically, good fruit don't come from a bad tree, right? So if you're just me, I grew up in it. So it's a little different for me. But if I was an outsider, if I was a person who knew nothing about this and I'm just starting on the path, let me tell you something. Based on what I see on social media, I'd say F this. I would never get involved.
Mhm.
Okay? Because I see regularly, like, for example, I know one person, and I don't like to name no names because, if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. But I know one person that they've created their whole social media account, all of their videos, all of their content is based on trying to tear down other priests and priestesses,
Mhm.
okay? No matter the tradition, right? If I'm an outsider, do you think I'm going to want to follow priests and priestesses that all they do is infight, that y'all scrapping over pennies and shit like that? Hell nah. You're going to tell me you're going to help me to prosper, but you scrapping over $3, bro? Like, get out of here.
Yeah, that's real. And I recently spoke on that. I feel as though we have to be careful about when you know somebody authentically comes through the culture, right? You have to be careful about those spats. Now, we have a lot of people who are not practitioners, who are not initiates, who are not even connected to the culture. Those are more the people that may need some of the smoke. Like, call them out and just say they're not this or that. But like amongst the real practitioners who you see them with elders or you see them in these places, now it looks really crazy because it's like there's not even a code. You will strike your own, and there's no code at all. Like even when you look at like people who are in the streets or people who rep certain gangs, there's still a certain code of like, okay, if this person is a part of this gang, then they're a part of this gang. We got to be careful about how we beef with that person. But this person who's false claiming this gang, nah, it got to be known that person is not with us. That I don't know what they're renegading. I don't know what that's about. We don't do that. We don't get down like that. That's not what we do. So it's too much of a civil war in the greater spiritual community sphere for the ATR true practitioners to clash. That's just
Yeah,
my personal opinion.
we have a saying that says "Le ungan rai ungan vodu agate." What that means is that when one priest speaks ill of another priest, his voodoo goes rotten.
Mm,
Okay, I've always, and the way I was taught by my godmother was that if you have an issue with another priest, and you know that priest is another priest, you pull them to the side in private. Priests deal with matters amongst other priests in private. It's the same thing, like in a lot of our minority cultures, we learn like basically family business isn't put out in the street. And so, like, basically, that's how we handle things, right? You pull that person aside. You might be like, hey, I didn't like how you moved this way. I didn't like how you moved that way. Or you're like, hey, if you see somebody doing something wrong and you know they're a priest, maybe they just don't know any better. You
right,
pull them aside and you're like, hey, like you did this and that, but this is how we do it instead, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if that person can't take the criticism or can't take the advice or the help, that's out of your hands. But
right,
you don't need to go ranting and raving about any other person. Anybody who's watched my content, I've been making content for at least 15 years now. You won't see any content of me calling out any other priest, calling out any other priestess, even when I know they're not doing as they should do. I call it minding my damn business. You feel me? Now, people will find out over time if that person ain't doing right or they is doing right. And I've seen a lot of those people who ain't doing right fall out of the favor of the spirits, fall out of the traditions entirely. Basically, they don't end up usually having that long of a run.
right.
You understand? I trust that the spirit is going to handle they handle. We didn't survive these many hundreds of years, thousands of years, because the spirit can't handle itself, you know? And I always say that the same way that true practitioners had descendants, I would say you have to remember scammers had kids too. There's descendants of scammers out here,
Right.
okay? And they learned how to scam too, right? So you got to be careful. You got to do your research. I always tell people spend time with the person that you're going to go study with. Spend time with them, get to know them, go to the ceremonies, like go to their events, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's real, but like you say, like priests have to be careful about, how they portray those things against each other. Because there's a lot going against us, and the thing is like, and people know I'm a person who's vocal about corrupt stuff in the community and things of that nature. But when you see me mix up with people, most of them, they're not priests. They're just masquerade as priests. They're not
Yeah,
initiated.
they're scammers.
They're just scammers, and y'all should know that. But the real issues with priests and stuff, most of that stuff people will never even know. You know what I'm saying? It's just I would rather just make a talk on a general issue that may be occurring in a community than singling out this, and that, because the shoe will start to fit and people could put it together.
Yeah, absolutely.